Hey guys, Mario Peshev from Devrix here. Today I ran a poll on Twitter and LinkedIn as well, asking my audience as to what's the most interesting kind of category or group of topics that people would be interested to hear about. And I listed a bunch of different things: entrepreneurship, running an agency, freelancing, WordPress, the kind of marketing things, or a few things that I was actually passionate about and that I tend to write and record and whatnot a lot about. And one of the most common things that people kind of voted for was freelancing. So today I want to discuss the four most important things that matter to me and a bunch of other people in my inner circle and outer circle as well when it comes to hiring freelancers for a business. Of course, those may depend. Different people have different priorities and hiring process and whatnot. Also, it depends on the type of freelance. It's one thing to hire a web designer or a graphic designer. It's a completely other thing to hire a writer or a videographer or someone else. So it kind of depends. But still, when I look for someone who needs to do a job for me or needs to work with me in the long run, I have a list of 4 things that are fairly repetitive that I'm looking for. So the first one obviously is skills. Second one is crisp communication. The third one is business acumen. And the fourth one is transparency. And I'm going to kind of dig into each one of those separately. In terms of skills, I believe it's clear. I want to understand that the person has the skills for the job. And there are several different details that matter here. First off, if that person lists another 50 or 100 skills that they believe they do, this is a red signal for me. This is an alert that's really telling me that this specific person doesn't really know a lot about any of those, or they kind of misrepresent their skills or whatever, right? Like, I don't want to hire, for example, a developer who also knows design, but also writing, but SEO, but this and that and this and that, and offers all of those, right? You can have kind of mediocre skills in most of those, but then excel at 1 or 2 or 3 of those, like just because you've spent a decade working on them, right? But when you list like 50 things that you understand, fluently, then it's a bad signal. And the second thing, of course, is portfolio. One of the tricky bits with freelancers is that showcasing portfolio is not always easy because there are NDAs, there are customers who simply don't want to get mentioned at all times, or there is a type of work that you can't really show and display and so forth. But for the most part, if you can write kind of case studies or any type of success stories or whatever type of kind of portfolio or background or any story as to how you work with that particular thing that you do, that's definitely a good starting point for now. Second one is crisp communication. By far, communication is the skill that's in highest demand both for hiring freelancers and full-time employees and basically any form of partnerships or whatever it is. So communication is paramount. It's absolutely important. It's one of the most important skills out there, and that's for real. So just keep that in mind. Whenever you want to demonstrate something by listing something on your website or posting on social media, whenever you're attempting to do the first phone call, anything that you do is related to communication. And that's why it's so important. And the lack of crisp communication means that, potential losses, lack of responsibility, lack of accountability, and a bunch of other things. Most people who reach out to us at Devrix for work state that the main reason is that the person they work with or the agency that works with, they're irresponsible, barely return phone calls and stuff like that. Like it just happened yesterday, kind of one more time. So that's super important. Number 3, though, some people don't really think about it, but it's business acumen. It's how well does the person understand the business situation they're working for. So being able to produce something, of course, is kind of a common thing. But normally the difference between a freelancer and a full-time employee is that the freelancer is probably not going to be available full-time, or they're going to work some weird hours or something else. And when you hire a freelancer, you usually come kind of with the expectation that they would understand your kind of key business goals, or they can even suggest and act as a consultant to that kind of relationship in order to contribute to your business needs. That's not a rule of thumb. There are a lot of people who kind of get hired with a very long list of instructions and simply have to stick to them and follow them. But more often than not, especially like freelancers working with smaller businesses, it's expected that those people understand business, because smaller businesses hiring freelancers for design, writing, development, SEO, whatever be it, they don't understand it. They just look for someone who can help them without bothering them with the details, or whenever they have a question, they want to get that answered. For instance, I don't understand design. I've been dealing with tons of stuff, but I don't really understand design. Have some basic concepts about color theory and typography and layout, but that's pretty much it. So when I work with a kind of third-party designer, I want as much expertise as possible in order to say, okay, those are the industry trends. This is the best way to, for example, lay out your content on the page, or this is the best way to kind of showcase your brand based on everything else that you do, yada, yada, yada. The more they ask questions, like, don't get me wrong, questions are important, and questions also showcase they're part of communication. Questions also showcase whether you get the problem or not. And asking the right questions is also crucial for determining whether you can do the job or not. But when you ask basic questions like, how do you want the design to be laid out, or how do you do this, or how do you do that, like if I say, I don't know, please advise, then I expect you to actually be able to advise, right? That's kind of the main thing. And for example, like when I've had a couple of assignments kind of asking people to do link building for different projects that we run. So when I do that, I expect the person who offers link building, among other things, which is signal number one, a problem. But when I ask that person to do that, I do expect them to understand the core idea behind link building. Otherwise, they do say, okay, we know that in order to build links, we need to either go to aggregators, directories, Quora, whatever it is, or spam at groups, or I don't know, post at blogs. But first off, that's wrong, and that can break anyone's reputation. And second, it doesn't really showcase any understanding as to how to identify the types of resources to contact, and what's your core expertise, what's your core niche, and so on, that eventually determine the types of businesses that you're going to outreach for links, right? So you need to kind of teach them the business, which doesn't really make sense. Like, it makes more sense to hire a marketing assistant or business assistant in-house, and at least teach them at a low fee to do that in-house among the other folks in the company. And the last thing is transparency. And transparency comes in different shapes and sizes. So transparency comes first on your website. So it's really hard to uncover everything about your business. And most types of services are not really priced equally. Like, for example, if you build websites, roughly speaking, you can't say how much a website costs, right? And most people really come up with that excuse with me. However, we also do build websites, and we do have a bunch of different pages on our website discussing that. First off, we do have the services page. Then we list the types of services that we do. Retainers are number one because those are the most important things we do. Retainers are priced at $90 per hour right now. This is listed. We have sample packages and whatnot. Second one, services. One-side things, a kind of fixed fee or whatever it is, they start at $10,000. Then we have an RFP form. The RFP form has drop-downs with kind of suggesting people what we are supposed to charge for kind of that kind of stuff. We do have a bunch of articles on pricing, on how to price a website, what costs how much time does anything take, and so forth. So some of our clients have come to us thanks to those pages, because that's a rational explanation first, and then it showcases what's our expertise and what's our expectation to do that. And when I look for freelancers, I also want that. I want to know how much they charge, how they charge, what's their process, how they're pricing, how they work with other vendors, how does communication work, and a bunch of other questions that are related to that. So when you combine those four things, skills, communication, business acumen, and transparency, you get a pretty successful combination, and you get a very high chance to get a client inquiry from someone who's actually interested and familiar with your services and familiar with your work. So keep that in mind if you're freelancing and if you're struggling with finding customers. Just keep that in mind, and give it a shot. This may help you and may kind of turn you into a more successful freelancer. Of course, there are different opinions, there are different approaches, but as working with freelancers for about a decade now, I know that those four things have continuously been among the most important aspects and traits of looking for freelancers out there.